we have once again Emmanuel Macron talking about troops in Ukraine. He seems to say this. He said this in an interview with The Economist, and he seems to say this almost every other day, every week now.
Absolutely. He's on a blitzkrieg on that thing.
Now, you've talked to me about Mr. Edward Luttwak.
Yes.
He had this article earlier in April of this year, literally calling for on the Unheard how it is time to send NATO troops to Ukraine. So as this very prominent neocon analyst scholar, he is calling for this. Now, I just wanted to show some of the cognitive dissonance here, because you also reported this on your Telegram, but there is this cognitive dissonance with this issue of sending troops to Ukraine, given the state of things on the battlefield. Here is what on Twitter talking about the exhibition of captured NATO military equipment.
Exactly.
So we can just see how
the
in
Wunderwaffen.
So you can just go to Moscow and take a look at how this equipment is becoming the property of Russia. And we have the BBC talking about this. They are very, how should I say, unhappy about Russia flaunting, as they say, the hardware. But all of this speaks to a deteriorating situation for both Ukraine and NATO on the battlefield, making this constant demand, if not a foreshadowing of the future, very curious to me in terms of how this would shake out for NATO should Macron's deep, dark, psychoanalytic wishes and desires be met in the conscious realm. So, Pepe, your reaction to, once again, and anything you want to say about the Ukraine conflict, given Mr. Macron's and Luttwak and all of this talk about NATO troops.
No, Le Petit Roi is a joke. You know, I just arrived here. I arrived here on Labor Day. May 1st is very important all across Europe and South America and Latin America. There were protests, of course. There were protests in the street, and including protests against the stupidity of Le Petit Roi. Well, he's desperate. He's hated by 90% of the population, at least. I'm going to check this again. I'm escaping to the countryside. I love discussing in the countryside about Macron because everybody literally hates him. And hate him because basically it's the same argument. He's destroying classic, traditional France, which is true because his agenda is Ursula von der Leyen's agenda. Guess, by the way, who's going to be the guest of honor when she meets Macron here? Guess. Just guess who's the guest of honor.
Is it Ursula von der Leyen? Is she the...
Can you... How cosmically...
I thought she was put in the customs section
exactly.
in China.
Exactly. Now you have to declare what... How intergalactically stupid you have to be in strategic terms to invite somebody that is openly despised by the Chinese, not only Xi, but the Politburo, the whole system. And this is something that Macron did not learn. Do you remember that famous scene when Macron visited Beijing, that he went out, they took tea together. There was this wonderful 1,000-year-old music playing in the background. And she basically told Macron, look, if you are a sovereign, we respect you. Otherwise, not really. What does he do months later? He invites the toxic Medusa, who runs basically the European foreign policy as a whole, to the meeting. So it's amazing. So we should run a poll all over the world. Who's the number one stupid Western representative of the elites? Is it Stoltenberg? Is it Macron? Charles Michel? All that. There's another one that I'm forgetting now. That's even or little Blinky. That's a hard match. Huh? if you put them all together, along with Ursula von der Leyen, wow. So you cannot take these people seriously, and nobody does, apart from the bubble where they operate. In fact, the bubble in Brussels now, the European Commission, the Elysee Palace, because they have nothing to show about anything. Macron is dreaming of the Olympic Games, which maybe he can parade Paris as okay. Paris is a world capital, but nowadays it's a shadow of the former Paris that we all learned to love. It's a city with unbelievable problems for a big city, and it can become very violent as well. So let's see what's going to happen. So he has nothing to show, and in terms of NATO in itself, one thing the people around Le Petit Roi understood, that the NATO that the Americans want for now and for the future does not include France, does not include French leadership. And that's why he's trying to make himself, a necessity. We're going to send 2,000 troops, we're going to send whatever. And everybody's laughing about it because they know that French army is a joke, and their weapons, apart from some missiles, are also a joke. Right. They understood at the Elysee Palace that the NATO that the Americans want is Washington, Warsaw, London, the Chihuahuas in the Baltics, and Kiev. The problem is the Kiev angle is ashes to ashes, right? Chihuahuas in the Baltic don't even qualify as a joke. So basically it's Washington, London, Warsaw. So that excludes France and Germany completely. This is what essentially the Democrats want for NATO, what most of the deep state wants for NATO, and maybe the Republicans will buy into it as well. So there's nothing left for France. And obviously Macron is not going to be a de Gaulle and pull out of NATO and build Franco-German force de frappe, attack force. No, this is not going to happen anyway. So it's a dead end for him. And not to mention the stories about his Madame Macron. I'm not going to get into it because then we get into
I've seen it.
Saturday Night Live territory. I prefer not to get into it.
But the fact that we have to mention it, I think it speaks volumes about the state of France. I mean, you talked about Mayday being very important. You also had, in France, here's just some images, what you can kind of see, just, police, everywhere.
And Danny,
this is what they do.
And they're treating the students here like this as well, just like in Colombia. They are treating the students at the Sorbonne like this as well. It's the same thing. Right. And obviously, nobody. I'm here for less than 24 hours now. Nobody understands the student protests, how they migrated from the US to French universities. They say, "Oh no, but this is completely different from Mai 68, May 6." Of course, it is different. It's a protest against Project Zionism, and this is something you can't understand in France because Paris is essentially controlled by Project Zionism, and you cannot say that out loud here. You see, so in terms of cognitive dissonance, one of the capitals of the world is certainly Paris. There's no question about that. When I was in Brazil, it was amazing because in Brazil, even if it's a completely polarized country, you go to the big cities like São Paulo and Rio, you can have any sort of political discussion about anything. In Europe, you can't, especially here.
Yeah, well, it's also interesting. I wanted to just show, there's the image of the police, and you shared this as well on your Telegram on Mayday, just, beating down French people who are celebrating Mayday. Here you have in Russia a completely different dynamic. And I'll just put the volume on. It's just very Not a lot of controversy here. Just people going about their day celebrating Mayday, given its historic importance in
Absolutely.
Russia.
In Russia, yes.
Um, but you know, I think this speaks to a very particular dynamic with what's going on in Ukraine. You have Russia on the one side, incredibly stable. You have people like Klueba talking about how the situation is deteriorating. Everyone is saying this now in Ukraine. NATO continues, whether it's France or whoever else, Ursula. They continue to throw out all of these potential ideas. Now they're talking about 10 U.S. Ukraine 10-year bilateral security
Yeah.
agreements, which will continue to prolong this conflict in their hopes. But then you also have Russia talking about, or at least the front lines are saying that things are collapsing, and that there are discussions and talks about how long can this truly go on? Will this be settled in some form by the end of this summer into the period leading into 2025? So I'm curious, Pepe, maybe your final thoughts on Ukraine, Project Ukraine, where it's heading, and what it reflects in terms of NATO's particular position.
Well, the cosmic humiliation is just around the corner. It would be a matter of minutes, hours, days, or months, but it's inevitable. And that explains all the moves coming from the hegemon and NATO as a whole. Well, Stoltenberg, a few days ago, if I'm not mistaken, he said that the entry of Ukraine into NATO is inevitable. What kind of world this guy lives in? This is complete absurd. So we cannot even pay attention to what they say anymore because they don't even know what they're saying. So when we look at the battleground, like Russia is conquering a village or a settlement practically on a daily basis. The meat grinder is advancing. Wow, but it's a solid meat grinder on a daily basis, and hardcore artillery, you name it, everything. So this is not going to change. They're going to think about, okay, how we want this to, do we want to conclude this in a summer offensive? Do we want to prolong it later on? Are we going to cross the Dnieper or not? So the same questions, right? And then later on, of course, Odessa and Transnistria. But what months ago, even Lavrov starts saying it on the record. It will be defined in the battlefield. And then only a few days ago, Nebenzia at the UN said bluntly, the only thing to negotiate is the modality of how they're going to surrender. This is where we are now. The Russians, they don't advertise what they do. They're never as blunt. They're much more subtle. And now they're being blunt as hell. So this proves that, that this is a game changer, equivalent to Iran finally saying, your free lunch on West Asia is over, people in Tel Aviv. So, these are game changers running in parallel, actually. So that's where we are. So it's going to be very interesting as one of the key themes of debate when Putin meets Xi a few days from now. They will discuss this in detail. All right. And something could happen before June. BRICS ministerial. Don't forget that Gaza is a key theme for BRICS, for the global majority, and it's a very complex theme when it comes to involvement, or in fact non-involvement of Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, because you can have their public opinions horrified by Gaza, but for the moment MBS and MBZ, they did less than zero about Gaza compared to what Yemen has been doing. Yemen is being hailed all over the Islamic world as vanguard heroes. And people look at MBS and MBZ, they understand that they are trying to play a double game. very uncomfortably. And obviously, Russia and China say, okay, where do you stand on Gaza? Because this applies to BRICS. BRICS are starting to have, I would say, they are coalescing their position on what's going on in Gaza. So soon we're going to have a BRICS position on Gaza. So the BRICS 10, they need a BRICS 10 position on Gaza. We're getting there. We're getting there. India is a very complicated thing to as well, you know. So, but the fact that all these processes are following, you know, the roads are parallel. Everything happens simultaneously. All the inconsistencies and all the dangers are crisscrossing all the time. But you know, we can say that in the next 2 or 3 months, something big may happen. Nobody knows what, really, but something big may happen. And this would be a game changer equivalent to the Iranian response to the Israeli terror attack, in fact. What's going on in Ukraine in terms of the battlefield now configured towards NATO humiliation, and the fact that the Chinese, and this is incredible, you have just been to China, they're losing their patience. And now you can see them losing their patience. Now it's graphic. Now you have images to prove it. We will never believe that this would happen so fast. And they are already preparing themselves to next year, depending on who gets into the White House. They know what's coming. Right. They perfectly understood that these three existential threats, Russia, China, Iran, they are number one. And then everything will be focused on them, probably starting 2025. Yes. So we have only a few months of, let's say, we are in calm before the storm, and just wait for the storm.
Yeah, and maybe we can close just because on this with you, Pepe.
Thank you.
Because there's this key theme, sovereignty. When I was in China, that is what, if you ever go to China, I'm sure this is true in much, especially the big powers now, Russia, China. When you go to China, what is completely off the table, what is non-negotiable for everybody, not just, or at least 99% of people, it's not just the Politburo or Xi Jinping or the NPC or whatever government body you want to talk about. It's everybody. What's off the table is any incursion, violation of sovereignty, any idea that China's sovereignty will be sold out, will be diminished, that is off the table. And it's quite clear from China, and that's the impatience is that the United States, and of course whoever drags along with it, are continuously moving to not just violate China's sovereignty, but to try to take it away. They're trying to subdue China. And that's where the impatience is coming from. And it's quite clear from just the trajectory of China's policies. Look at this Europe trip. I mean, look at you said it before, who's being visited. Serbia, on the occasion, actually happened on my birthday. I think I was 9 years old when it happened. On the occasion of May 7, 1999, the bombing of Belgrade, which killed Chinese journalists, bombing of the embassy. Then you have Hungary, which is, while has its problems, is considered
Belt and Road. Belt and Road.
Yeah, exactly, the Belt and Road. And then in terms of so-called NATO members, Hungary is considered one of the few sovereign in terms of its policies, that it makes independent decisions. And then, of course, you have France, a very interesting decision, given that it's China uses France, I believe, as like a communication conduit of, hey, Europe, you need to be more autonomous. And it believes France is perhaps the most shaky link, given all that we just discussed with Macron's, he has these almost like fetishistic, Freudian desires, but at the same time, there is also geopolitical reality. I think China is very well aware of this. So sovereignty is the key theme here, in my estimation. Absolutely. I don't know if you have any final comments, because it's Russia, it's China, it's Iran. These are the countries that are the sovereigns. They are the ones who cannot be budged. They cannot be shaken. And that's why they lead this multipolar world. And that's why they're making decisions the way that they're making them. But your final comment before I finally let you go.
Yes, of course. Yes, in my previous book, which I launched in early 2021, it's coming out in Italy now, Roaring Twenties. I call the main essay in this book, which I did for a think tank in Azerbaijan, in fact, is called The Three Sovereigns. So we were already thinking about Russia, China, Iran as the three sovereigns at the start of the decade. And that's where we are now. These three sovereigns are setting the stage for the coming of the multipolar world. And it's not an accident that they are considering the three top existential threats to the empire of chaos. So this is where we are now, ladies and gentlemen. And for the moment, let's do a Bob Dylan. Let's sing Shelter from the Storm, because the storm is coming.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.